he then tweeted this week that, why is Ukraine not hitting back deep into Russia and so on? He seemed to be upset about things, and that could be, of course, linked to this attack.
Welcome to Superpowers, the future of global security here on Times Radio. I'm James Heappey, and today I'm joined by Anna Wieslander, who is a fellow at the Atlantic Council and formerly senior official at the Swedish Ministry of Defence. Anna, welcome.
Thank you.
Join in another extraordinary week where the Ukraine problem has returned to the White House. This time seemingly without the drama of the last time that Zelensky was there. But give us your sense of the moment we've now reached. Is a peace deal emerging? Is Europe clear on what is required of it? Will it work? And most importantly of all, is Putin actually going to play the game?
Exactly. Very good questions. And I think that's exactly framing it where we have to look. Now, as I see it, there are three main dimensions in this, because there is no congruent peace process as I see it. I mean, you have the US, you have President Trump, who really wants a deal. He wants to make that peace, as he says, and he's willing to negotiate on a lot of things, as we have, with an appeasement approach, which has been problematic. And then you have Mr. Putin, who is not that eager to have a deal at all. And if there is supposed to be a deal, it has to be on his terms. And we have not really seen any change there. Some hints from him, but mostly that seems to be traditional Russian negotiation strategy. And then the third dimension in this deciding the dynamic of this process is the Europeans and Ukraine. And I think there we had a moment before last week, before the catastrophe of the Alaska summit. Before that, Europe came together in unity, supporting Ukraine, but it was obvious that they had no leverage on the process. And then Alaska came, and that really made them push themselves into the White House summit meeting, sitting at the table, and I think making a bit of a difference, increasing leverage. We could argue as one supporting Zelensky, there has to be a ceasefire. We also, I think, were helpful in putting the land swap discussion aside. At least it didn't become a big issue as we had feared between Trump and Zelensky. And then there was big optimism, and I think perhaps a bit of wishful thinking regarding the security guarantees earlier on this week, where Europe felt that, I think what mattered to Europe was that they felt that the US was finally hooking into, and it was possible to lock the US in with some kind of bigger engagement that they had signaled before. Where we are now at the end of the week, unfortunately, with the meetings that have occurred, there is nothing really substantial to that US engagement on security guarantees. I mean, the US has never been completely lifting itself out of the security guarantee discussions on Ukraine. But the Trump administration has all the time from the start been very clear that Europe will have to do the heavy lifting here. It's mainly Europe's responsibility to safeguard Ukraine after a ceasefire peace agreement. That has been the message all along. And I don't really see any big difference in what they have been saying. I mean, troops are excluded. We shouldn't be surprised by that. Some air component, a bit vague. What is it? I think the major issue, which is very fundamental, is the intelligence, the surveillance, the reconnaissance connected to the command and control structures where we have nothing to replace the US. Will they provide that? And how about the naval component? We need also to secure the Black Sea. So there are a range of questions still on the security guarantees. We haven't really moved the way we hoped earlier on this week. So, I mean, to sum up where we are now, I think Russia has basically not moved at all from what I have seen. They still have no genuine interest, it seems, in a peace agreement or even a ceasefire. The Trump administration and President Trump himself is still interested in a deal. He has not really left his appeasement approach, even though he has been more sympathetic towards some of the European arguments, not buying into them though. And I think what has really perhaps happened these past weeks is that, and I really, it seems to me, and I hope, we have said it many times before, Europe is waking up finally to the Russian threat. But there is a feeling that the US might not, lead this. Perhaps we really have to do something, because you hear Macron saying all the time, this will come back to us. This will hit us, European security. We cannot just let this go. And that's a bit, I think, of a bit new shift. You have Merz, much more powerful, Chancellor Merz of Germany than his predecessor. So here, I think this is where the movement will come. I think this is mostly where it will happen, perhaps. Europeans discussing more around support of Ukraine. And I really think this is where we have to change, because as it is now, Europe is in the back seat, Trump is driving, but he's not driving in the direction we want to. And we can't let this go on for too long.
Well, thank you for such an excellent summary to catch us all up. I mean, I think the thing that I would reflect is the person who's had the best week of all really is Putin, who managed to get the moment of, shaking hands with the president of the United States, establishing himself as the big leader of a superpower, deciding the fate of smaller, less worthy nations, tete-a-tete in Alaska, whilst, as you rightly note, frankly conceding nothing.
Exactly.
And I think that's, he continues, I think, to get the better of Trump in the negotiations. I'm interested in your reflections on the newfound urgency with European leaders, and I agree with you. The rhetoric is encouraging, that the penny is dropping, that Europe really is going to have to do this in large way without the United States. But do you get the sense that the EU as an institution and then European countries individually are actually ready to spend the money and accelerate the acquisition of capability, and also, equally importantly, have the willingness to face a bit of danger in order to kind of properly give those guarantees teeth?
No, yes, I agree. That's definitely the challenge, and the proof will be in the pudding, so to say, on this. We have heard it before. This is Europe's moment, and now Europe is waking up to all kinds of hard situations, caught between a hard place and a rock often. So that it remains to be seen, but. Still, I think the planning of the coalition of the willing of Ukraine, led by France and the UK, has been. I mean, that's the work that started already in April. It has been ongoing, and I think it's useful what we see now, even if it does not lead to what Zelensky is asking for. He wants it down on paper basically within a week. Because he wants to use this momentum, as he sees it, of course, to kind of nail down, especially, I think, the US commitment to such security guarantees. There will still be so many uncertainties if we don't get a process going here on negotiations, exactly when to use this, how to use it, to what extent to use it. So I think it will not be that concrete, but it will still be useful what we see. What kind of resource do we actually need? How much land forces can we get together? I think we need to think creatively here in a more of a European way. We don't have the troops that the US have available to put in. We know that. I mean, we can scramble together some troops, but not the same amount. What can we do? Can we use new technology, drones? Can we use smart way of doing this? Where to be in Ukraine? How to work together with a very potent Ukrainian army and supply them with things that there we can do more. We haven't given everything, and there are still things to both to provide and to accelerate production capacity and so on. And in a way, a lot of these things are, if there is a will, there is a way. I believe you have seen it in Ukraine, right? You have seen Russia accelerating. So this is not impossible. It is difficult, of course. I understand that politically, but it's still not impossible. There are also things that we have not done, like seizing the Russian frozen state assets. I mean, it's Only in Europe, within the EU kind of framework, there are 193 billion euros frozen that are dependent upon renewed EU sanctions every 6 months. Now, we could segregate that money and transfer it into a more secure reconstruction fund for Ukraine. And there would take interest rate on such a fund. And it would send a great signal, I think, towards Russia that, Europe is really taking an initiative, doing something to show that we support Ukraine. Ukraine will become a member of the EU one day, and we are committed to building peace and prosperity in Ukraine. That would shake Kremlin, I think, if we really did that. And it's doable. It's also, again, a question of, as you say, I think that's really the point there, James, to take a bit more risk towards Russia. We have had a rather comfortable position, always trusting that in the end, the US will do the heavy lifting when it comes to Russia. They will face Russia from a superior position as a superpower going after a smaller great power. And we will be safe behind their back. Now we are 8 months into almost the Trump presidency, and we don't really see those signs. They do not apply peace through strength when it comes to Russia. There are some words here and there, some threats, and the president gets irritated, obviously, but it's not a strategy, it's not a policy. And meanwhile, we are losing a lot of time, I think. And not only that, Europe could, one, be helpful in this process by putting more pressure on Russia. And Europe is risking a lot of, much more than the US in this, if we do not. If we let Trump pursue an appeasement policy towards Russia, and Russia stands strong and basically rejects everything, it's Europe and Ukraine who will face the most danger in this process. It's a very dangerous path. So it's not that it doesn't make any difference. I think it's on the contrary a dangerous path, and we need to act on that.
So my former colleague and great friend Ben Wallace was on Times Radio earlier in the week, and he reflected that if these security guarantees fail and Russia restarts armed conflict in Ukraine again at a later date, that will almost certainly be the moment that war comes to this continent. Like this is a moment where the peace has to be durable, has to be properly enforced, and Putin has to know that moment has come. I wonder whether our leaders are yet speaking in terms that recognize the magnitude of the importance of the guarantee that they must put in there. That this can't be Minsk. It can't be something that works for now, but can be ignored in 5 or 10 years' time.
No, I agree. And I think that we have to realize how these things are interlinked. So making a peace deal in Ukraine is also linked to the future of Europe not being a structure where we divide it into spheres of interest, where smaller countries like the Nordic, like the Baltic, and a range of the Eastern European states are having a very, very limited space of maneuver for any kind of security or defense policy issues decided not in dialogue with Russia. And this is what Putin foresees. This is what he put forward in the 2021 treaties. We have it on paper. We know what security for Russia and Russian security guarantees, as it actually was what he was asking for, looks like. And this we have to take, we did take it very seriously. Sweden and Finland actually joined NATO because also of these treaty drafts. But it is connected to the more shorter term or more limited issue of peace in Ukraine. It doesn't stop there. And that's why it's so important to have a long-term enduring solution. In my view, Ukraine belongs not only in the European Union, but in NATO. I think all the things we're doing now, struggling with these alternative security guarantees, NATO-like things we could work on it much more easily if we had taken the irreversible path towards NATO membership for Ukraine if we could have taken that more seriously. Now, neither the Biden administration nor the Trump administration really thinks it's a good idea with a NATO membership for Ukraine, to be frank, and that kind of hampers that whole discussion. But I mean, we have to remember that should be basically number one, actually. But so we are all the time we are changing our positions into a much more difficult position for Europe to solve.
But was it a mistake not to have representatives of the B9 in the Oval Office the other day? For our listeners who don't speak European securocrat, B9 being the border states, the frontier states of NATO. And they were conspicuously absent from the conversation. Was that a mistake?
Well, as I understood it, the Polish president was invited to the meeting, but Prime Minister Tusk wanted to go, and it became some kind of domestic discussion around this, which ended in Poland not being present at all, because it was supposed to be Poland to be that country quite naturally. And I think that was unfortunate. I think that if you any chance you have to sit with Zelensky and Trump together, and have more representatives from the countries that are most affected by the Russian threat, is of course useful, because at that time you have the ear of the President of the United States, and you have the possibility to put forward your arguments. So in that sense, it was unfortunate that Poland wasn't there. Now I think the other countries, as far as I could hear, did a good job. It was nothing to be ashamed of when it came to the European representative at that meeting. I think, on the contrary, I thought we did a good job. One can joke, of course, who represents Europe? Is this like a group of 5 or a group of 6? Why can't it just be one? Always, who do you call when you talk to Europe? But Europe is like this. It's representative for Europe. I think that we are different. There are different countries, but we still discuss and we unite. And at greatest moments, we are aligned. And I think that what we showed.
I agree. Well, I think one of the dynamics that I think is less often discussed is that for Putin, there is a peace dividend. And this enormous Russian army that is currently concentrated in Ukraine, with peace, he gets to send that back into the Northern Fleet Military District, the Western Military District, the Central Military, the Eastern Military District. And all of a sudden, the Lithuanians, the Latvians, the Estonians, the Swedes and the Finns, who have been looking across the border at pretty much deserted garrisons for the last few years, all of a sudden are looking across the border at battle-hardened formations who are now back in their home military district. So, the challenge to NATO's enhanced forward presence and the deterrence that it puts on the front line needs to, at the very least, not be impacted by whatever commitments are made to Ukraine, and probably even needs to be strengthened. And everything that European countries in this coalition of the willing offer to Ukraine needs to be additional to that sort of holding the line with NATO. And I think too often people assume that you can move troops from Estonia to go and do stuff in Kharkiv. And that, of course, is completely wrong-headed.
I think it's a very good point. And you can see that 2 countries that have not offered yet to have troops in Ukraine are Finland, with its long border towards Russia. Finland really has a very strong army defense, but they are convinced they need to stay there and hold the line, so to say. And the same with Poland, actually, who has invested heavily in its army, given historical experiences with Russia from time to time. They are not keen to go to Ukraine on this. And history and geography plays a big role in these, and it makes sense also, as you say, because it's a very good point, because NATO cannot afford to look weak towards Russia. If we look weak or come out weaker or apparently weaker from negotiations, giving up concessions to Russia in the Ukraine peace negotiations, we will have a big disadvantage in this situation, as you just described, because Russia will be emboldened at this point, and might find tactical opportunities to test our resolve and our defense and deterrence. So we need to be strong all over, and I think one part of that should be to be bolder in at the present state, and put pressure, dare to put pressure on Russia. I don't understand why we should not do it. I was in a discussion yesterday with a former American official who said, repeatedly commenting on the Trump administration's negotiation process here. She said, the US is a superpower. We are a superpower. It's like we are acting like a dwarf, but we are a superpower. So the US is at this point not using all its instruments, and I would argue Europe is not either, actually. We're quite keen to focus on our weaknesses, our problems, our domestic challenges for politicians and so on. But this is the moment, really, where I think not huge efforts, but some congruent, bold moves could really shift the balance. Because there is some kind of movement in this process at the moment. I mean, there are some openings, but we're not really using it strategically.
Is Donald Trump essential to the peace process? Is there, if he loses patience and sort of disengages, looking for something different to do, is there a version of this that is brokered by Macron, Merz, Starmer, and von der Leyen? Or is America absolutely essential?
Well, in my thinking, basically I mean, US is a superpower, yes, and the big advantage that Trump has now is that Putin answers when he calls him. He lifts the phone and he has long conversations with him, and they seem actually to have some kind of exchange that is not only silence or not getting anywhere. They have some kind of communication, and that's of course an asset in any kind of statecraft or diplomacy, to have that link. I'm not sure that the European leaders would have that at this point, because for Putin, having this contact with the US is of course what he wants, what he strives as. It mirrors where he wants Russia to be as a global power actor. So to kind of, from a Kremlin point of view, to lose that and have to deal with the Europeans would be a great loss. So we would have to force that on us. But one version of this is to be bolder towards the US and say that, Mr. President, really welcome all your efforts, and we believe that Europe can play a special role here in putting pressure on Russia, while you have the role of kind of, being the communicator towards Putin. Now, the problem for Europe is, of course, we never really know what they are talking about. But if you just want to get that pressure on, instead of just waiting for the US to post those sanctions, which would be excellent, but will they come? We don't know. Will they freeze? They have $27 billion of frozen Russian state assets in the United States. They could, of course, take those money and buy weapons for it and send to Ukraine. Or, I mean, there are lots of things they could do, but they're not doing it. One thing could be to kind of see if we could still work with the US and Europe, but kind of shift the roles a little bit, and for Europe to step up and take that risk, because in the end, we also risk that Trump makes a deal and Europe pays for everything when it comes to deteriorate security.
Well, Trump makes the deal, Europe pays, not on terms that Zelensky or Europe really agree to nor feel able to deliver on, and all whilst reinforcing in Putin's mind that neither Kyiv nor other European capitals matter, and it remains a conversation between Moscow and Washington. And so I would like to see European leaders being more assertive, not at the expense of Trump's role. He clearly is important, but I fear that the choreography of things at the moment just reinforces to Putin all the wrong messages.
I think there is a big risk. What I really liked with the White House meeting was that the Europeans were there at the table with Trump. I think that matters from a Russian perspective. That gives a little bit of, they don't put, they don't choke, but it's something that they notice, I think, and that he sits there listening to them. Of course, he broke the meeting and talked 40 minutes to Putin, but still he came back to them. So that's much, much better than Zelensky Trump, because Trump is a president who values, great power to great power. He often tells you that, Russia is a great power, and he enjoys having conversations with that. Ukraine is a small power, a victim of this fight, and for him, it doesn't have the same kind of shine to it, or not. And to be frank, not the same interest as well as having this line with the great powers. So this is his worldview, strong man to strong man, and I think this is what we have to kind of try to take advantage of as much as we can, of course. But I mean, the fear I have now is that if we don't act exactly as you say, we are not seen as players in Europe from the Russian perspective, and we are not playing that much, to be honest. I mean, yes, we put up sanctions packages, that's good, but there is also always the fear of one country, often Hungary, then, threatening that the sanctions package will not be passed, or that there are problems and so on. So I think this instrument, even if it's described by the EU as maximum pressure on Russia, it's not maximum pressure on Russia. We have to be honest about that. There is much more we can do.
Agreed. Now, what my suspicion is, this factory that got hit the other night, that was US owned, it was a tactical decision with no political messaging in mind. But I wonder how thin-skinned Trump is, and that if US owned assets in Ukraine find themselves being destroyed by Russian missiles, is there a point at which Trump feels like this is an affront to America, to which he needs to respond, not militarily, but more robustly than he has hitherto?
That's an interesting question. I mean, he then tweeted this week that, why is Ukraine not hitting back deep into Russia and so on. He seemed to be upset about things, and that could be, of course, linked to this attack. He completely changed his mind because he criticized Biden exactly for allowing Ukraine to hit into Russian territory in November this fall. So, but that's the way he works, and to some extent that's how politics works. You can change your mind, and in this case, it would be in a good direction, because Ukraine needs to have that mandate, of course, for what they want to do. So yes, I think, but I don't think one incident will shift him, because he's very solid in his approach to Russia. I mean, we recognize it from his first term as a president. I don't think he once criticized Mr. Putin publicly during that term, and we have hardly. Now he's been irritated, and he asked, what the hell is he doing, and but so a little bit more of that this term, but still. So much more at stake, because we have a full-scale war going on in Europe since past through 3 years, and he's still not acting. And I think it's not that the Trump administration. I mean, he put forward he said, so yeah, I will make peace in 24 hours during his presidential campaign, and it was put forward to him that the idea of putting maximum pressure on Russia as he entered his presidency, and then he could kind of lift that pressure while they were negotiating. But that never kind of reached into the inner circle of the Trump administration. They have kept the plan that they had, and which they presented more or less bits and pieces of during the presidential campaign, which was to kind of start with a range of concessions and meeting Russia, and then from there on negotiate even further. And a range of politicians, experts warned against such a strategy, knowing historically how Russia works. And I think that has been just proven right. Actually, the fear of a false peace, kind of a just for Russia to take their breath and come again. We see not that this strategy of concessions or appeasement is working. And I would also say that, I mean, another proof of that is that since the Trump presidency took office in January, we actually see we have statistics on this, how Russia is increasing its bombing of civilian infrastructure and hitting civilians. So it seems as if it's not that Russia will become emboldened by things that happen now. They have already been emboldened by the fact that the US is not showing enough strength towards Russia. That's the short version of it.
What can I ask then finally, because I'm conscious that we are almost out of time, how Europe and the US, NATO, can show real strength for Russia? We've discussed that it could be tougher on sanctions. We've discussed that it needs to keep going with its defense spending and properly do it. But what do you think will happen in terms of US disinvestment from Europe, if anything? And what do you think will happen in terms of a pathway to Ukrainian NATO membership? Or is that just dead, forgotten, never going to happen?
Well, I think it's extremely. There are things that Europe could do that we're not doing yet, and we should think hard about this and see if we could move forward. I think we should take the lesson from when the US shut off intelligence to Ukraine in the spring, and see, how could we possibly work or have alternative precision information channels or satellites and other things to make this work for Ukraine and perhaps also for us. This is something we think a lot about in the Baltic Sea region, because if there is some kind of movement from Russia, we will basically have no time. We will have to be able to act immediately. There are such small distances, so there is like the second one that we notice that someone is passing, we need to be able to act. And what if the US is hesitating, or we've entered a new phase where we experience something like that? It would be completely devastating. I mean, it cannot just happen. So we should, I think, these things, and to see, okay, so we can perhaps provide this to Ukraine also and to us, and see how do we actually fuse this, the ISR with the command structures, and who does this, what kind of software do we use, what kind of satellites do we have, can we do it in a European way, a way that it's not copy paste of American, because everything is bigger in America, we know that, but we still have things to grasp. We still have assets. It's not that we don't have it or could produce it. So there I sometimes lack the idea of being able to act, to what do we want? Yeah. So we want to be able to sustain and prevent that anything like that ever happens again. So how do we solve that? So those things I think we can work on. We could also, there was a lot of discussion on this troops, the security guarantee and the troops necessary and so on. That's a huge mission. But what if we do something smaller in Western Ukraine, put an air shield above and do some more training missions there, kind of establishing ourselves there in smaller versions, but still there for humanitarian reasons, for training missions. That will complicate the picture a bit for Russia as well, and that's also, we come back to taking a little bit more risk. But it's a risk that has to be weighed upon the bigger risk of not acting. And I think that we don't discuss that enough. What if we would just wait, and we have Trump driving the car, and he's just driving in the wrong direction, and it will end in a way that comes back to hit Europe much, much worse.
Fascinating. It has been brilliant to have you on, Anna. Thank you. Please do come on again. You've been watching Superpowers, the future of global security here on Times Radio. I'm James Heappey. Our guest this week is Anna Wieslander, the Director for Northern Europe at the Atlantic Council. For more of Times Radio's wonderful geopolitical commentary, make sure you like and subscribe the YouTube channel. But otherwise, we'll see you for more Superpowers next week.